Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies, where tonight is going to be the most interesting night of all time here on Talk Junkies. I'm just starting this one off, baby. It's going to be a fun night, but before we get into tonight's podcast, I want to thank Dr. Joel Hirschhorn for coming on last week. It was a really good podcast just about last year's blunders of the COVID pandemic. Just if you want to check that out, check out our last video on YouTube, and it'll lead you to the link in our description to our new BitChute channel. And it's also on iTunes and Spotify and all those things as well. His book's going to be on your left, very top, Pandemic Blunder. Check out his book. You can find it on Amazon. Dr. Joel Hirschhorn, thank you for coming on last week. It was a fantastic podcast. But anyways, tonight is a very special night because what happens when you die? And I'm not talking about where do you go or if there's an afterlife or if there's nothing after you die. Something does happen when you die. And tonight's guest is going to explain to us what happens when you die and what your family members are going to experience and just kind of the financial aspect behind it. Just a gentleman that I know personally. He's a very fantastic gentleman. Brendon, thank you for joining Talk Junkies, man. How you doing?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. How are you guys tonight?
Fantastic.
Good. Living the dream.
We're live.
So I didn't really say what it was that you do, my man. So just kind of just give us a description of yourself and what it is that you do and how you got there.
All right. I am, I guess, an estate planning attorney, right? So I talk to people about what happens to their stuff when they pass away, that kind of thing. Who's in charge if somebody loses capacity, who passes away, and who gets what, when, why, and how with their stuff and whatnot. And so I guide people. Really, everything I do is designed to avoid probate.
You keep the government uninvolved with my family affairs, and that's a A+ in my book.
Yeah, a common theme with estate planning is no courtrooms, no lawyers, no judges, and definitely no IRS if we could help it.
That's, yeah, we're going to be best friends.
Yeah. So before you kind of get into it, man, what led you to this? Was there something like overarching when you were younger that wanted you to help people out in this situation, or did it just kind of happen?
It just kind of happened. There was a really, really wealthy family that was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal back in 1987, where one of the parents had passed away and the brothers all started fighting over the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars and that kind of thing. And that kind of fascinated me, where the families started all fighting and suing each other and that kind of thing. And so I think that really, once I decided to go to law school, got me interested in that kind of thing. And the more I got into tax classes and that kind of thing, it just kind of all morphed into where I'm at now.
Very nice. So go ahead, Jesse. Sorry.
No, I was about to say that's got to be a weird job just for the fact that that's such a mourning portion of people's life, and you have to come in when people are grieving too to help financially resolve all that stuff. Like, does that ever weigh on you at all?
No, usually with what I do, you see people on good days, right? For the most part, because people, something triggers it that they need to do something. Somebody passes away, they see something happen to a friend or something like that, and it triggers a desire to get some things done. But if you get to that process early enough, then when somebody passes away, or if somebody gets sick, becomes incapacitated, develops dementia or Alzheimer's, something like that, then all the wheels are in motion, everything's in play. And so it makes a difficult process for the family a lot smoother. It makes it less difficult. And so it's by and large a hand-holding business, right? Because not all families are created equal at all. So when you sit down with somebody, basically you take two snapshots. The old school Polaroid cameras, you push a button and the picture comes out. Right. So when you talk the estate planning process, it all starts with two of those Polaroids. And the first one's a picture of that family dynamic, right? Is it a blended family? Are we in a first, second, or third marriage? Do we have his, hers, our kids, that kind of thing? Do we have any issues with any of the kids? Are there any substance abuse problems? Are there any, special needs? If somebody's, disabled, that kind of thing. And then the second Polaroid is a financial snapshot. And what we look at is how assets, what kind of assets are there, how they're titled, so we can avoid probate. And we need to have a general idea of how much is there, because we need to know if Uncle Sam's going to want to have their hand out. right? So you put those two Polaroids together, those two snapshots, and it paints the picture as to what that particular person or family's best options are, to get them from point A to point B based on what they're wanting.
And how many Americans are actually ready for something like that, or how many people do take the steps to do those types of things? Because I mean,
they say between 60 and 70% of the people have not done it yet.
Okay, I thought you were about to say 60 to 70% have, and I was like, man, that seems
No,
a little
have
high.
not.
No, that's
They have not done it. And do you know why? Really? Because it's a 3-strike business from the get-go. Strike number 1 is somebody's got to go sit down with a lawyer. Nobody likes to do that. Strike number 2 is they have to talk about dying and becoming incapacitated. And strike number 3 is it's going to cost them some money. So, as long as they're feeling good that day, it can wait till tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like something that people will put off about as long as they can.
Well, it's not like,
go ahead.
It's not like it's something that you're really even taught anyways. Like you said, I mean, every family's different. So you would have to grow up in a family that kind of prepared you to do something like that early on.
Something like I say, you hear horror stories. What happens if mom or dad or grandma and grandpa have to go into a nursing home? They say that the state, takes the house, or takes all their assets, that kind of thing, if they have to do it. Or usually they'll hear a horror story or something like that, or something, heaven forbid, happens to somebody, way too young. We go through life, and life does throw curveballs. We've all experienced them. Sometimes they're positive curveballs, but sometimes they're negative curveballs. Things don't always work out the way we want them to. And so the estate planning process is just a way to prepare yourself for the future. And what you want to do is you prepare for what happens if something happened to you today or tomorrow, knowing that you don't want to use anything you're doing today or tomorrow. You want it to collect dust for a long time, so you got peace of mind that it's there. If you're a young family starting out, you have kids, heaven forbid something happens, you're in a car wreck, who's going to step in and raise your kids for you? Who's going to be the guardians and whatnot? So people once somebody turns the age of 18, there's certain things that they can only do to get the wheels in motion if something happens to them, right? And to stay out of that courtroom process.
So why is that courtroom process even there in the beginning? Is it because of financially that the government wants to get involved in people, because they know if 60 to 70% of people aren't prepared for this type of thing, then they're collecting a lot of money, are they not?
Well, it's not necessarily the state that's collecting money. So what happens, right? And what the probate process is, and there's 2 forms of probate by and large. There's probate. The most common form of probate that people are associated with is what happens if somebody has to take a piece of property through the probate process when they die. So let's take a house, for example. You and your wife own a house, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So on the deed to that house, it's got both of you on there, husband and wife, right?
Yep.
Okay. So if something happens to you, what happens is we take an imaginary eraser and we take your name off of that deed. We look at the deed and your wife's name's on there. We know exactly who owns it. No probate, no courtrooms, no lawyers, no judges. It's hers. Now she passes away. Now we take an imaginary eraser and we take her name off of that deed. We look at the deed. There's no names on there. We don't know who owns it. And so that's what probate is. It's a method of establishing ownership. So to figure out who's going to get the house is we got to go talk to the probate judge. And the first question the judge is going to have is, did they have a last will and testament? Last will and testament, you hear that term a lot. And it's got big fancy letters, last will and testament on there. If you just cross those words out, write dear judge. A will, by definition, is a probate tool, and it only works if we're sitting inside of a courtroom talking to a judge. And so if we have to take a house through probate, depending on what state you live in, you're going to have to sit. It's a hurry up and wait game. You're going to sit and twiddle your thumbs and wait. And then you're going to have to pay a probate attorney to make that process happen. And even a relatively simple probate can take, between 6 and 9 months. And if you're taking a piece of real estate through there, a probate attorney might get upwards of 5, 6, 7%. of whatever the equity is in that house.
Wow.
Right. So that's a bad result. And it might not always want to have that happen. And then heaven forbid you take it. And do you have kids?
Yeah, I have 2 kids. They don't have kids.
You guys don't, but you guys do. So your kids, how young are they?
4 and 2.
4 and 2. Okay. So let's say you guys did, and then your house had to go through probate, and you didn't have a will or an estate plan or anything like that. Okay. The state you live in is going to have an estate plan for you. If you don't have a will, it's called dying intestate. That means you have no planning in place. So your state's going to have it, and the state says it's going to go to your kids, but they're going to have to wait for it. And because they're too young to catch money, because you can't give money to 4 and 2-year-olds, they can't catch money until they're 18. And so, and no 18-year-old in the world needs money, right? We're pretty stupid at 18.
Absolutely.
We all made solid decisions at 18.
I don't know if I need it at 30. Like,
well, I'm 50, and my decisions sometimes are questionable as well. So what happens is then that money that's theirs is going to go sit in what's called a conservatorship. That's going to be supervised by a judge, and the guardians who would be selected to step in and raise them. You had a grandparent, a sibling like that. Every time they need money for them, they're going to have to talk to the judge, and then at the ripe age of 18, your kids are going to get that money, and that's a bad result. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, because I didn't even think about that. They're getting the money as soon as they're legally adults. And do you really want your kids to have 100% control of that amount of money at 18 years old?
You don't. You know, statistically, about 80% of inheritances are gone in about 18 months or less.
Wow.
Doesn't matter
that's
how old
crazy.
you are, what you get. It's kind of like lottery syndrome, right? It's kind of like winning the lottery. So, you know, we're buying a house or paying off a house or paying off student debt, paying off credit card debt, buying new cars, taking a trip or two, that kind of thing. It's not really squandered. And it increases somebody's quality of life, but the money's gone pretty fast. And 18-year-olds, they don't do it. So that's what, on the estate planning process, that's what we do is we plan for what happens to your 4-year-old and your 2-year-old and all your stuff if you and your wife passed away, right? So you guys in this process, first off, you'd set up powers of attorney for each other. We'll talk about powers of attorney in a little bit, but you would set up some nature of a trust for your kids that would catch your house, catch life insurance policies, catch any retirement accounts, catch bank accounts, that kind of thing. And then you would select who would be in charge of managing that money, and it would be held for them. It's theirs. It's just not theirs to go and blow and waste and that kind of thing. So it can be held in trust until they're a little bit older and more responsible, age 30, something like that. I have a bunch of teenagers at home, and I think maybe age 90 might be when they need to get there. They're not super responsible with it right now. So the estate planning process is you're selecting. You're calling the shots. You're not letting the courtroom call the shots. You're not letting the judge call the shots. You're doing it. And you're putting it all in black and white. And there's just different documents that are associated with that process to make it happen.
What's the level of taxation that happens on that transfer of wealth over to the people receiving it after death?
That is a great question. So what we're talking about there is the estate tax. Okay, so you hear it called the death tax, the inheritance tax, the estate tax. What that tax is, it's really a tax imposed on transferring wealth down to the next generation, down to your kids, or really anybody other than a non-spouse. So what Uncle Sam of the IRS says is that when somebody passes away, right, they have a certain amount of money that they can pass for free. Right. So when somebody passes away, what happens is before you get through to the pearly gates, right, you got to get through the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper's the IRS. The IRS agent's got 2 questions. How much money do they have? And then where's it going? So as long as however much you have is under a certain dollar amount, then there is no tax. There's no inheritance.
What's that dollar amount? What's that dollar amount?
Now it's 11.78 million per person.
Oh wow, okay, so nothing I need to worry about.
No, it's a really high number.
You're good, Jesse. You're fine.
So and to get to that number, you take into account, what's the death benefit of life insurance? What are the retirement account values when somebody passes away, real estate bank accounts, all that kind of thing, right? And then that's a really high threshold. It didn't always do that. When I started practicing a long time ago, the number was 600,000, right? And so if somebody passed more than 600,000 to their kids, Uncle Sam wanted to have their hands out, and the tax rate was pretty high. Right now, that 11.78 million it's indexed for inflation, but it's also scheduled to ratchet back down to a baseline of $5 million in 2026. Every time we kind of do a tax act, they do a 10-year tax act, and then it kind of reverts back down to a different number. And right now, there's a few proposals on the table from the Biden administration that could significantly lower that right now and change the landscape of the tax structure quite a bit. So we're just kind of waiting to see if any of that gets muster, if anything happens.
I almost want to ask your opinion on that, but I feel like that will turn into something else. How do you feel like, just a little bit, not to get too political, just staying into your field directly, how do you feel about term life insurance?
I think life insurance is great for a lot of things, including term. Like, perfect example is Paul here. He's got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, right? And I happen to know he and his wife, and I know they're both hard workers and do that. But if something happened to Paul, or if something happened to his wife, that insurance becomes really important, right? Because, Paul, if something happens to you, that insurance is going to let your wife be able to pay off the house, right? Maybe grieve a little bit, not be stressed about the finances, because it will leave her with the pool of money to help raise those kids, because now you're gone. If that makes sense, I think it's a good thing. I mean, I have insurance still.
And I'm not super well knowledgeable in the whole thing, but I have a big, whenever it comes to the finance, I look to a lot of Dave Ramsey. And I don't believe in everything Dave Ramsey says, but he's really negative on the term life insurance aspect. Not life insurance, but term life insurance. He's not about, for certain reasons. I was just trying to get your opinion on it there too.
And I get where he's saying, because it's like you're paying money for something, and odds are you're not going to need it, and so you're not, if you don't need it, which means if you don't die, right, it's not going to pay out. Which you got to pick your poison there. Then you've wasted that money, in theory, right? Which is kind of where he's coming from. Whereas if you buy a different kind of an insurance product, variable or whole life or something like that, you're still building up some savings. So if you don't use it, it's more of an investment vehicle.
Yes. but
I'm not against term. I'm not against life insurance at all. I think it's great. Term insurance, especially for young families starting out, that kind of thing, they don't have a lot of disposable income, right? And so it's a cheap way to protect or hedge against something really unfortunate that could happen. I've had to sit with young families where a spouse had died, not leaving any insurance. The widow could not keep the house. They had to immediately go back to work because there's no money there. It's a disaster. Some cheap term insurance, even a few $100,000, would have been all the difference in the world for them.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So I don't disagree with Dave Ramsey. I think he does great, but I don't necessarily agree with it either. I think for a lot of people, it's a good option for them.
I was just very curious on your opinion on that, because he's like, for me, as far as my financial setup goes, I've really enjoyed Dave Ramsey, not so much on so much of his political side, but his knowledge of finance and fundamentals of finance. I
like him for the basic math portion of it.
Yeah, for people, and especially, I'm like, they should teach this in high school. Like what Dave Ramsey says,
they should.
They need to be teaching the basics of finance, like how he views it, which is just so easy to read.
Well, like not even Dave Ramsey, but what it is that you do, I think that some of that should be taught in high school as well.
Oh, this should be too.
Yeah, I mean, because
this is like real life shit. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like
it is real life stuff. Real life things. I mean, it's something as good grief, as simple as counting change or balancing a checkbook or something like that. Because when somebody, people pass away, that kind of thing, all of a sudden, one of the spouses has paid all the bills and done everything, and then they pass away, and the surviving spouse has no clue, doesn't even know where to start. Right. So when you sit down with somebody like that, you just kind of start going through checklists of this is what you're looking out for. These are the steps you need to take, that kind of thing. That's why, it's a hand-holding business.
I have a question when it comes to the whole, I have a question when it comes to the whole last will and testament thing. And I don't want to get into, I'm going to stick with the financial side of it and not get into like cremation and so many of these other things that do interest me and whatnot. But
that's a different document we're going to talk about on that one.
Is the last will and testament of someone, especially if they go through a lawyer and do everything the correct way, black and white on paper, is that the highest form of power? Like, does that override, for example, let's say a person were married, but they're technically married, but in their last will and testament, they were to say something like, my wife doesn't get this money, this goes to this person.
That will not work.
Okay.
Okay. But first off, let's talk about something here. So let's say that the will says that. First off, you don't necessarily ever want to use a will because, like I said a little bit earlier, a will by definition means that we're taking something through probate and we're in a courtroom. So we want to, by and large, avoid that. And how we avoid that there's different ways to avoid it, but a trust, a revocable living trust, is probably the best way to avoid it. But not everybody does that. Sometimes, let's just say, for your example, you said, hey, I don't want to leave my wife anything. The will says I'm not going to leave my wife anything. I want it all to go to my kids, right? Mm-hmm. Your life insurance beneficiary designation, you have your wife is the beneficiary of that life insurance policy. Doesn't matter what the will says. The will doesn't control that because that asset's not going through probate. That means the insurance policy is going to the wife.
Gotcha.
Same thing with the bank account. If you have a pay on death or transfer on death designation on it, right? Or the beneficiary designation on a retirement account. Those things are contracts with the company or with the institution that this is where things are supposed to go. So we don't need a will to tell us where things are going. We don't need probate on that.
Gotcha.
To do. So, and then so when you talk about an estate plan, right? Every estate plan, there's different bulk hats hats that people need to be able to put on or be empowered to put on to step in a situation and deal with things. Okay. Paul, let's say you're in a hospital. All right. You get in a car wreck, you're in a hospital. You've been married how long?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. Been married 3 years. Did you know that if you're in the hospital, your wife can't do a dadgum thing? She can't talk to the doctor. She can't do anything unless you have designated her as your agent under a medical power of attorney.
I did not know that.
Right. A lot of people don't. They just kind of assume because they're married, they don't. But neither Kansas nor Missouri will allow that. So medical power of attorney is where you actually designate somebody to be able to step in your shoes and make medical decisions on your behalf. Right. So when you talked about cremation there a little bit ago, cremation is my screen looked like it did something goofy. Sorry, guys. Cremation is where you're going to put, hey, I want to be cremated or I do not want to be cremated. That's where you're going to put that in your medical power of attorney, because your medical agent's going to be the one that can make those postmortem decisions, really. You're not going to put it in a last will and testament because nobody can use a last will and testament until a judge allows them to. So there's a period of time before that can happen. And all the postmortem things, burial arrangements, that kind of thing, those all tend to happen pretty quick for the most part.
I mean, it would have to be. It would have to be.
Yeah. And so that's why those medical powers of attorney are so important. And everybody over the age of 18 needs two documents. They need the medical power of attorney and they need a financial power of attorney. The financial power of attorney is where somebody's going to be able to deal with your health insurance, to be able to pay your bills, that kind of thing, to step in your shoes if you don't have the ability to act on your own behalf. And if we don't have those documents, then have you guys heard of what's called guardianships and conservatorships?
Mm-mm.
You ever heard those terms before?
I mean, I've heard of guardianship before.
Yes.
Okay. So what a guardianship is, let's say you get in a car wreck, right? And you're in really bad shape and you're rendered incapacitated. Okay. You have a bad head injury, something like that. You can't act on your own anymore. So if somebody doesn't have those powers of attorney in place, then the family's got to go basically strip that person of all their legal rights because they can't make their decisions. And so they get a guardianship established to be able to take care of the person, right? So that's what a medical power of attorney is intended to avoid, because you're selecting it while you can. Okay. And do that. And then a conservatorship would allow somebody to take care of the money. And that's what the financial power of attorney is going to let you be able to, you've selected who's going to do it, be it a parent or a spouse or something like that. So you're calling the shots, you're selecting. If you're, I've seen 30-year-olds get hit by a drunk driver that all of a sudden they're forever 7-year-olds now, right? With no documents in place, no anything. And so the family's got to go through these court proceedings. They're there for a reason, and they help get things done. But if you can avoid those court proceedings, families are always better off.
That's got to be costly too.
Right in the family.
That just sounds costly.
For the most part. What?
That just sounds costly.
Guardianship's concerned. Yeah, it is costly.
If something's
it's a
not
lot
set up.
cheaper for people to take care of things ahead of time than to react after the fact.
Now,
almost always.
Are there ways, and maybe you wouldn't even be in business if this were the case, but are there ways for people to not get lawyers involved and do these types of things by themselves? Are there documents that they can get online and fill out these types of things to avoid dealing with courtrooms?
Well, not necessarily to avoid dealing, because if you're doing, there are. You can do your own will online, your own trust online, your own powers of attorney online, that kind of thing. And I'm a big believer that any document's probably better than no document. But what those online versions can't do is they cannot tell you what your family dynamic is, what problems might be associated there. They can't address any of that stuff, whereas I can. I see online documents quite a bit. I review a lot of other documents from people, honestly, all over the country, as they move in state, that kind of thing. But if you've looked at them long enough, that what's good, what's bad, what's indifferent on things. As far as the courtroom process and whatnot, if somebody's willing to do a lot of the legwork by themselves, they might be able to do it. People can get divorced on their own. They don't have to have an attorney. They just kind of have to figure out, how to do those deals. And a lot of times they don't work out great, especially if there's contested issues and that kind of thing, but it can be done. The same thing can be done really in a probate process and that kind of thing. But a good lawyer is going to be able to help navigate through things. Like, I don't do probate at all, but I farm that work out to a couple of people that know a lot of tricks to the trade that I don't know on there, that makes it more streamlined. If you're having to go through a courtroom process, makes it easier for the client, right? I streamline the estate planning process so nobody has to go to court, but I know what questions to ask somebody when they're sitting in front of me, to be able to help hold their hand and get them where they need to be.
I was going to say, at the end of the day, it almost seems like it comes down to how much you actually care about that too. Like, if you really care about where your money's going, where your power of medical attorney or everything like that is going, then it's probably better to spend that extra money and make sure it's bulletproof and go through a lawyer and everything. If you're just kind of I kind of just want to have this on paper just in case, but I don't care too much, then maybe, do it on your own, whatever, blah, 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 take the simpler route, whatever, the cheaper route. But if it's something that's actually important to you, like it should be, it seems like spending that extra money / time and getting an expert to do it is probably the route to go.
I would agree. I mean, you take it, the world's full of niches, right? Everybody kind of finds their own niches. I can try to fix my car on my own, or try to fix my air conditioner on my own, but I don't know what I don't know what I'm doing. I'm probably going to screw it up.
Yeah.
But somebody that knows how to do it, They can come in, they can fix it, and that's money well spent because it's taken care of.
I can
Right?
change
So
my
again,
oil,
I
but
mean,
I'm not
it's
trying to drop my transmission out and replace all that stuff on my
Yeah.
own and everything. There's no way.
Exactly. I mean, honestly, I had this conversation on Friday morning. I was getting my car serviced. And this kid was asking me was asking me what I did, that kind of thing. And he was like, I don't think I could have, I don't think I could have made it through the schooling. I'm like, well, I don't think I could fix my car like you're doing for me right now. I mean, it is a world of niches. And that's one of the beautiful thing about my area is I get to see what people do. What they do for a living, what they've done. I mean, it's really a pretty good area of law.
So I don't know if you know if you can go down this type of route, but how did we get to this place in the first place where there are so many different types of estate type of laws and structures that are in place? And I know you said it's a state by state basis, but how did it get so complex to where it's to this point where we're having this conversation, trying to inform people about it?
Yeah, it does seem pretty convoluted.
Yeah, is it just like the politicians or city council, these types of things, or where there's just too many problems back in the past to where they just said, hey, you know what, we just got to make this standard.
Before we had laws, it was kind of like a wide open deal, right? So back in the Stone Ages, when somebody passed away, they put all their belongings in the middle of the village, and whoever could get there the fastest and pick up the most just got the stuff.
Oh, that's what I want to put in my will.
Member or something.
Yeah.
Right. So these probate laws and that kind of thing, they came in place to, okay, if somebody passes away and they don't have anything in place, yes, it's going to go to the wife or it's going to go to the kids. It's going to go where it's supposed to go. And then we decided, why do I have to go through a probate process? What if I want to be able to control things for my kids or be able to hold things and protect my parent if they have to go to a nursing home or something like that? And so that's where that concept of trust comes up. And the concept of trust came when, back in the Middle Ages, when, when they had knights and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what would happen is when the knight was going off into battle, he would pick a friend, a trusted friend to, if he died in battle, then that trusted friend would give the property or dole it out to his wife or kids afterwards. And that's really where the notion of a trust came.
Okay.
So way back then. And so over the years and years and years, it's developed and kind of taken a course. It evolved, and that's where law is. It's embedded. We're embedded in common law, right? So people have done things over the past, and courts or judges have ruled on things, and so we know how things operate. So the area doesn't really change fast. Things change here and there, that kind of thing. Different administrations, they'll move one way or another on taxes and that kind of thing. But overall, the same effect's the same. If you don't have something in place, you're going to have to go talk to a judge, and most people don't want to do that. So it's better to have something in place to avoid that, to make sure you are sending what you have down to the people you want to have it, and how you want them to get it.
So,
right.
And sorry to kind of interrupt there. It's something just sparked, and I just want to make sure I say it before it goes away. So I know you kind of brought up an example of like a house, and if I were to die, Carrie Ann would get the house, depending on what type. If I either had a will, whether or not we get a judge involved or not. So let's say, for the sake of this conversation, I have nothing, right? And so I have my financials. I have a Robinhood account. I got E-Trade. I got Coinbase. I got a whole bunch of different accounts with a lot of money in it. And I have a car, and I have all these things minus the house. So what type of things happen when you die, when you do with all this new online cryptocurrency and online banking?
Stocks in general.
And stocks in general, yeah.
Do they have to be liquidated? Do they have to liquidate the stock? Can it be from a brokerage actually be transferred over to another entity?
And I think what I'm asking is, does the government get their hands on the money at that point in your type of stocks if you don't have a plan?
Stocks are a weird one. That was actually one of the questions that I had in the background of my head.
Let's talk about stocks. I'm going to tell you what my trust does. Okay, I got 3 kids. I got a blended family. All right. And I treat all three of them as though they're all mine. Okay. So if I'm gone, what my trust says, and let's say I have a Fidelity account, it's got stocks in it. Okay. I die. My trust becomes 3 trusts, one for each of my kids. Okay. One for Olivia, one for Drew, one for Maya. It holds it until they're a certain age and that kind of thing. And the answer to your stocks is that Fidelity account would get divided, and the trustee, whoever you select to be in charge, has the ability to either liquidate those stocks and fund each of those shares with cash, or they can take, and let's say there's 30 shares of Apple stock or 30 shares of Amazon. You can take 10 shares and put them 10, 10, and 10. You can divide those shares. You don't have to liquidate them. But the trustee or whoever's in charge can be able to do that. It's the same thing if I had a Charles Schwab account and I decided to name all 3 of you as beneficiaries of that account, and I had different stocks in there.
Go for it. Feel free, by the way.
You guys as beneficiaries, right? And I have a bunch of teenagers, so I don't really have much in the way of stocks. When that happens, so then if you guys are all the individual beneficiaries of it, all right, Paul, you could sell your stock and take the cash if you wanted to, and you can select whatever account maybe you want to put it in. Open a new Robinhood account and have it sent there or something like that. You guys can each individually select what you want to do with it, either keep it, that kind of thing. Now, let's take it a step further and where you're going with the taxation and that kind of thing. So I bought Amazon at $100, and when I died, it was worth $200. Okay.
Hope you still have it, man.
That stock, all that $100 of appreciation disappears when I die. It gets what's called a step up in basis. So when it passes to my kids, or if that account passes to you guys, your new basis is $200. So if you sell it, there's no tax.
Oh,
Really?
But if you keep that stock in place, right, and it goes from $200 to $250, and then you sell it, now your basis is going to be what it was when I died and I gave it to you. So it'll be $200, but you hold on to it. Now you sell it at $250. You're going to pay long-term capital gains taxes on that $50 of appreciation from the time you inherited it to the time you sold it.
Which is like 40%, like the 40%.
I mean,
Or
long-term capital gains taxes are lower.
Oh,
It's
no. That's after a year. I'm sorry. I was thinking, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That's
because
short
you
term.
don't have to hold
That's
it
short
for
term.
a year when you inherit, right? So you get what's called a tax holding period. So you automatically held it for a year.
that's crazy that that's crazy that it sets a new baseline though when you pass it on. That it's not like,
Step basis.
hey, you bought it for 100. So now when it goes to your kids, even though it's at 200 and they sell, they don't pay capital gains tax on that because their baseline is 200. That's actually really interesting, and that's the opposite of how I thought it would work.
Unless it
Whereas
crosses
if I give it
that
to you-
threshold, right? What you were talking about, that threshold being crossed of that $11.7 million, right? Then that comes into play there. Very interesting. That was one of my bigger questions for you.
It starts to fill up, right? So if you kind of picture all the assets that you have, like that stack of books there, if you go to the riverboats, you got a stack of chips, you're making bets, winning bets, losing bets.
Never happened to me before, but okay.
That's kind of what, everybody's got a stack of chips they go through with life. Some stacks are bigger than others, right? And you make bets, you win, you lose, that kind of thing. So it grows. So it's however big that stack of chips is whether, and so that's why it's called that estate tax. It's a tax imposed on transferring wealth. So right now you can either give that amount away or you can die with it while you're alive. Now, the Biden administration has some proposals that could change the complexion of those right now. And I've got a lot of people asking, what's going to happen. And honestly, right now, we don't know what's going to happen because nothing's really gotten any traction on that. So we just kind of wait and see on what happens with that. So on that same share of that $20 of stock, if I paid $100 for it, if I died with it and it's $200, you got to do 200 basis. If I give it to you while I'm alive, Your basis is what I paid for it, so it's $100. So if you turn around and sell it, your basis is only 100. So it's called a carryover basis if I give it to you, but you get a step up in basis. All the appreciation disappears if you die with it.
That's crazy. I never knew that. And I never thought it would work that way.
So, when something, so that's how stocks and that kind of thing work.
But just hold on real quick. Also, so like even with stocks, if you, let's say you don't have anything said and done with what happens when you die, same thing with a house, it would go to your next of kin or your kids.
Well, it would, like, okay, so you live in Kansas or Missouri?
Missouri.
Okay. So if you died right now and you didn't have a will or anything, okay, it's going to say your house, the stocks, everything, and you don't have any beneficiaries, anything on there, right? Everything's just in your name alone and you die, right? All that's going to go through probate, which is going to tick your wife off, okay? And then what the state of Missouri says, they have a plan in place for you. If you don't have one, they've got one. And it says half of it's going to go to your wife, half of it's going to go to your kids. Your kids are too young to catch money, so it's going to go to a conservatorship, and then she'd probably be in charge of that, but she's going to have to work with the judge when she wants to get money for your kids.
Okay, so no matter what it is, whether it's stocks or cryptocurrency or anything, when you die, if you have nothing in place, it will go through probate, and the state will then have a plan in place for you.
Yes.
That's crazy that the state actually does it. I didn't know that the state actually did that for people.
They do. They have what's called dying intestate. Every state has a plan in place for you, but I can tell you that plan is not what you want.
Right.
No, it was interesting to me.
So that's why you plan for something. That's why you take care of it.
Right.
So their plan doesn't do it.
Exactly.
Now, what really interests me there is you had to ask the question whether or not he was in Missouri or Kansas. How big of a difference is it in Kansas with that scenario?
Not a lot.
Oh, okay. I was just No, I was just curious because I was like, oh man, it's Kansas. Oh, it all goes to the wife at that point or something. I don't know.
I've just heard horror stories of people saying like, man, you definitely need to get involved before like something happens when you die because it just turns into this big mess and the state gets
involved. Well, you still do because of probate and all that. Like
right. And I didn't know that's what they mean when the state gets involved is they're going through probate.
They're going through the probate process. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're having, you've got to publish notice to creditors. I mean, it's kind of a pain in the neck. Probate's not always unavoidable. I mean, if there's wrongful death lawsuits, that kind of thing that are involved, sometimes that stuff has to, the probate process isn't always a 4-letter word, but if you're taking significant assets through probate, it is definitely a 4-letter word. All you're doing is helping fund a probate attorney's 401k is what you're doing. That's the retirement thing. So you avoid it. And usually the cost of an estate plan is significantly cheaper than taking an asset through probate. Almost always. And it's easier for people. You can't always, sometimes people don't always, get to it soon enough. I had not very long ago. We've had some unusual cases over the last couple of years, but there was a business in play. There's a blended family in play, that kind of thing. The dad was terminal, knew what he wanted to do. All the documents were done. He went non-responsive before he signed them. Actually at the appointment.
Oh, wow.
It was a hospital thing. Died. So then, we figure it out because everybody knew what he wanted, but he didn't have it in place yet.
And the state doesn't care at that point. They're going to step
They
right
need
in.
paper.
We still kept it. We've kept it out of it. We actually did have to do something with a judge on that one to sign off on what's called a family settlement agreement, where everybody had kind of agreed what they wanted to do, but a judge had to approve it to really make it happen that way.
Sure.
So there was some added steps and some added expenses for that to happen. Whereas if he would have lived long enough to have signed it, he wouldn't have had to gotten the courts involved.
Yep.
So, Brendon, let me ask you, what happens? I kind of want to switch gears here a little bit.
Okay.
We've been talking about like equity and assets and stocks and everything and money. On the opposite end of that, what happens if I'm the beneficiary of everything? Just example, I'm the beneficiary of everything of my father or whatever.
Okay.
And he were to pass away with just debt and no assets, no, you know what happens on the negative side?
That's a good question. The good news is you do not have to pay them.
Okay.
Right.
Woo,
I'm just kidding. My dad's not in debt. We're good. Hypothetical.
You don't have to, but let's say that he had credit card debt. Right. As long as you haven't assumed that debt, right? Signed for it, that kind of thing. That's a different story. And that's your debt. But if he had credit card debt, that kind of thing, and you left you as the beneficiary of a life insurance policy, you don't have to use that life insurance to pay off that debt.
Really?
Why? Because that asset doesn't have to go through probate. Okay. So what happens is you send the credit card companies, when they keep sending you mail, you send deceased, no estate, you send it back. They would have to file a claim in a probate estate, but there's no assets to go through probate, so they're not going to get anything. Same thing with medical bills. That's what that process is. So the fact that he gave that to you outside of probate, you don't have to pay it.
Now, if it were to go okay, so same situation, but this time going through probate and not having any will in place, not having any,
and the life insurance proceeds, no beneficiary, and so it's going through the estate.
Mm-hmm.
And there's credit card bills and that kind of thing. So then what happens is, and that's a really good case in point. So the life insurance, so what's going to happen is an estate's going to be open. You have to notify all known creditors, and then you have to publish notice to unknown creditors. Like, you take an ad out in the paper and publish it for a while and do that. Then everybody's got to make a claim in the estate. So what's going to happen is the funeral home's going to get paid. The lawyers are going to get paid. All the creditors are going to get paid, and you're going to get whatever's left over.
Wow. So you definitely want to avoid probate in that case then.
Yeah.
At all costs.
Yeah, almost always. I'm telling you, you always do.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely always. I just meant in general the debt thing surprised me. I never knew what no, that's what I'm saying. That's a really obviously
big difference.
On the positive side of things. Let's say you knock on wood, you die with tons of money and everything. You obviously still don't want it to go to probate because then your kids are getting it at 18, your wife's getting half of it, whatever's going on. You want to avoid that and make the decisions yourself. But then on the negative side of things with debt and all that, that's almost even worse going through probate kind of thing because
it is. Now there's an exception in Kansas and Missouri on that. If you're married and somebody has medical debts, medical bills, the surviving spouse is obligated to pay the deceased spouse's medical bills.
Oh.
Okay.
The kids aren't. That's what would be called filial responsibility, where the obligation to pay that debt, goes downstream. That doesn't happen. But a surviving spouse has to pay the medical bills. In that case, you want to make sure that the bills are valid and the amounts are right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just because a hospital sends you a bill doesn't always mean that that's what the amount is.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a conversation for a different time completely
That
as far as
definitely
healthcare
is.
goes.
Well, I was always curious where that tale came from because it's like, as growing up, they're like, yeah, man, if my parents are in debt, then I'm going to get all their debt and I'm going to have to pay it. Like,
See, that's what I've heard before, and
No,
Jesse
you
and I
got to
have
sign
talked
off
about
on that. That's not accurate.
it. That's what I was going to say. I've heard that, but I never thought that was actually true. I was like, man, I've never heard of anybody actually inheriting debt.
Right.
Like,
it wouldn't make much sense. No, this is where
that's good to know, though. Not that like I said, not that it matters. That was purely hypothetical, but that's good to know.
Is this something that so when someone wants to sign up for like a process that you provide, are there scales to which it happens?
Yeah. I mean, so it's like when we sit down with somebody, set up an appointment, we sit down and we talk. We go through the snapshots, that kind of thing. You like me, you don't like me. This is what you need to do. This is what it takes to get it done. This is what happens. And then we do a second appointment. Sometimes people like to look at documents first. That's fine. My experience is they almost never read them. They're boring, right? I mean, it's a good way to fall asleep. It's a pretty solid cure for insomnia. Legal documents are pretty boring. But Then, we sit down. When you look at it at black and white, it makes a lot more sense. We talk about things, whatnot. We sign it, we get into effect. And then we talk about how we make plan work, which means how we need all the assets to be titled. Do we need to change beneficiary forms? This is what we go tell the bank, that kind of thing. We always handle the real estate for clients and whatnot. We're pretty picky about that as they're a closely held business, right? How do we deal with that? So that's what the process is. It's pretty efficient and pretty streamlined, but this is the only thing I've talked about for about 22 years now.
Sure. So is it a one-time type of payment, or is it a recurring monthly thing until you die?
No. It's everything we do is on a flat fee, right? And I know I have a law partner, and she does really good about keeping at least in the the metro area about on what people are charging, that kind of thing. And we're in the low mid range. And for the services that we provide, a lot of attorneys don't do that. There's different ways of different attorneys have different schools of thought as to what we don't charge to talk and that kind of thing. So we're not on a time clock. Usually the first appointment lasts about an hour, sometimes a little bit more. The signing appointments usually last, between an hour and 2 hours, depends on the questions people have and whatnot. And then there's usually a third titling appointment where we deal with the assets once the documents are in effect. And, sometimes those are 30 minutes, sometimes they're an hour and whatnot. But no, it's a fee. Usually we get half to start and half when it's all done.
And then that may sound scary to some people, how you just described the process, and I think for a lot of people who don't, and including myself, it's just something I never really even gave thought to, and I'm just trying to imagine myself as someone else that sounds scary to. But it's like, if that sounds scary to you, just listen to the previous 40 minutes of this podcast and realize how important that is if you have a family.
And how scary the alternative could be.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's
exactly. So you're just doing it. And so I'm a big believer in options, right? People explore their options. And when we're talking about this stuff, it's a relationship business, just like, a choice of physician or an accountant, or, for crying out loud, a hair stylist,
barber,
or anything. Everything's a relationship business. Your insurance, your financial planner, whatever. Work with who you're comfortable working with, that you have a good feel for. I mean, if they're good at what they do, you're probably going to get taken care of, but you got to be comfortable with them, because honestly, there's an element of trust there.
Well, I'm sure you got to,
and there should be.
You got to feel it out, just like anything. Like you said, a barber, like anything. If you're going to a counselor, you got to
shop all the time. They'll shop and they'll go talk to 4 different lawyers, and then they almost always come back. I mean, that's fine. I don't care. You can.
I mean, that's how it should be, realistically, too. You should, want options and want to look around.
Yeah. I always encourage, if I'm referring somebody out, somebody asks me, hey, I'm looking at doing insurance, can you do that? I always give them 3 names. And based on the personality and the personality of the people I'm sending them to, all 3 of those I think will be a pretty good fit, right? Sometimes you can tell a personality is not going to mix. And so I'm probably not going to get, refer that one out.
So hold on, I got one question real quick. So in your practice, sorry, Johnny.
You're good. I got one right after you're done, though.
This is a good one, Brendon. So do you see a lot of biases whenever you do get involved into the courtrooms and stuff like that? When it comes to just the law of what you're talking about, I think it's probably pretty cut and dry. Or is there a lot of opportunity for the judge to kind of just direct his own or her own type of authority and just completely change the whole outcome of a situation when it applies to death?
So, I don't know. I don't never go to a courtroom. So
you don't? Okay.
Judges never. I keep it all out, right? We keep it in play. And
That's what you do. I got you.
What might be coming down the line if we're disinheriting a kid, right? Something like that. We're not treating everybody equally and whatnot. If somebody, all right, somebody's going to get mad, that kind of thing, and try to undo or sue. We try to address and shut that down.
So it
doesn't happen. As far as something happens, like let's say that you're in a courtroom, judges always have some element of discretion, because like if it's designating a guardian for a child or a minor child or something like that, their only job is to do what's in the best interest of that child. And so they have to, make a determination that the people that either you've selected, or if you haven't selected, that are vying for that position, are a good fit.
So I think what you were getting at is, what is the leeway the judge has towards making decisions, or they really have to be by the book?
Like when it comes to probate and stuff like that.
Probate, like what's their leeway? Do they have some give? Like you know how whenever it comes to like federal prosecution of like an indicted person for like murder, there's a lot of leeway that comes with the judge on making that decision. Is it the same way whenever it comes to the probate scenario, or do they have to be really by the book?
It's more cut and dry.
Okay.
Probate's
that
a
answers
lot.
that answers that
it's
question.
not nearly as exciting as a murder case. I would.
Yeah,
suspect.
no, but that's I think that's what
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
that's what you were trying to get at.
Are there
Like
politics? Are there
like
politics
some-
involved when it
or,
comes to probate?
You know,
there shouldn't be too many politics involved. Every once in a while, I guess there could be. It depends on how good the document that they're looking at it was, or how if there's no will in place or anything, and everybody's fighting. He said, she said, that kind of thing. I guess there could be some discretion or leeway there, but by and large, it's pretty cut and dry.
I was going to say, from the sound of it, it seems like if there were politics involved, it'd be more on the family side.
Yes.
Not the actual
Yes.
cut and dry law side.
Yeah.
Everything's easier if people play nice.
Yeah.
Always.
My question that I was going to ask, sorry, Jesse.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm taking up too much time as it is.
Oh God, now I'm trying to remember. I had it. It was on the tip of my tongue. Jesus Christ.
You can think
Go
about
ahead.
it. You
Go
can
ahead.
think about it while I ask this question. Are there ever, like, I see this in movies and stuff like this, to where they have like a video documentation of like their last living will. Is that actually a thing people do? You know what I mean?
Where they videotape it?
Yeah. And
No.
then
Not really. And you also don't sit and read a will. Like I say, if you're reading that stuff, it'll put you to sleep pretty fast.
no, that's like so cinematic to me. I was just curious for somebody who's in
It
the
is.
field.
So where
whether-
you would do that? So let's say where you would do a videotape is if you have a borderline capacity issue where somebody they have capacity but not all the time, right? And they're doing making a decision that they're disinheriting somebody, or they've had a change of heart. Then you very well might videotape the whole thing to establish, because now the person's gone, that hey, this person did know what they were doing when they did that, and this is what they wanted to do.
Now, does that have contractual like differences compared to their living will? Whenever they videotape something, you can prove it that this was after the living will, even though there was no like.
So it's video Trump signature at that point.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what
Man,
That's
it is.
another like branching question
Video
from
does
that.
not trump signature.
That's what I figured.
Video, in my mind, the only reason you do a video is unless the person really just wanted it, I guess. But I've never had anybody just really want to be videotaped. But if to really establish that the person had capacity to sign and do what they're trying to do.
Oh, just
Right.
that extra layer.
You're trying to-
Extra layer of protection, knowing
Yes.
that something might get challenged in the future.
You're trying to
Yes,
prove that they're
okay.
cognitive and of
Yeah.
their own free will are
because
doing
they got
this.
their mental marbles going on.
Yeah. Okay, I remember my thing now. The whole thing was, for someone, what would you say is the first step? Let's say people have been watching or listening to this podcast and they're like, you know what? I actually want to go out and I want to do this and everything. Even if there's someone like me I'm not married and I don't have kids, but God forbid, knock on wood, something were to happen, I actually do have assets or equity or whatever you want to call it. I have stocks and stuff like that. I want to give that to a certain person, my mom or my sister, my dad, whatever. What should be knowing nothing about this other than what we've talked about, what should be my first step? Like first and second step?
Call somebody and sit down and talk about it that specializes in this area.
Just Google it, look into it, and just kind of.
You could, yeah. Sometimes word of mouth, that kind of thing is a lot. I know a lot of our business is word of mouth and whatnot. Sometimes it's from an internet search or that kind of thing, or a Facebook page. I know a lot of people will sit, even in my neighborhood that I live in. There's there's a bulletin board, those next door neighbors or whatever it is. They'll ask, hey, who do you recommend for an attorney? That kind of thing. uh, I look at, I mean, people find things, and whatnot.
Okay, so it's not that difficult though. I was just curious
But
on
you
that
want
first,
somebody
like,
that specializes. I can promise you don't want to go to somebody that does a whole lot of different things, right? Law, like everything's a world of niches. It's hard to be really good at a bunch of different things.
I don't want to be calling
Right.
the 1-800-LAW now billboard or whatever.
Jungle Law. Jungle Law cracks me up, by the way. Did you see
No,
the
that,
jungle?
that is pretty solid. That's pretty funny. No, he's not going to know anything. Like, so there's a guy who does Jungle Law, that kind of thing. You know,
Dude,
one
that
of the
cracks me
buildings
up
we
so
work
much.
out of. And you know, the first thing he's going to do if somebody asks him is to call me or call my partner. That kind of thing. Just call those people. They're going to know your answer to that.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of Americans out there that are our age and that don't have kids and don't, and they do have assets and they don't really know what to do with it. So I think, that's
something I need to look into.
Yeah.
Legitimately need to
It
look
is.
into.
Yeah.
It is. And then somebody that's good, all right, these are your options. Have you thought about this? What do you do? Sometimes people don't even know what options they have.
I don't think anyone knows what they have.
No,
I don't.
Well, people our age don't think about this.
Yeah.
This is going to be a really
I'm
weird
immortal.
podcast.
I'm
Well,
gonna
now
live forever.
everybody's young and
Yeah,
invincible still, right?
I'm immortal.
Still,
I'm gonna.
like,
I'm gonna.
30. I'm 30, and I still feel invincible. Besides my back
Exactly.
problems
So
and my
So what
overweightness.
happens is, it's funny. We just had somebody, they lost a father, and these girls, and it was funny. They signed these these trusts the other day, and they were kind of got excited because they talked to a financial planner and they'd done this. They felt like they were actually adults now. They like crossed to the other side. We've done something we're supposed to do. But the key is you do it, you think about it now, and then you set it aside and let it collect dust, and then adapt and change it. Life evolves and things happen.
But you guys are involved in that process the whole time, which is really cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, people call me all the time. Hey, this is what I'm doing. How am I supposed to do it? What do I do? I'm like, great. This is what we do. That kind of thing. This is what you're supposed to do on this.
So,
right. So they call me, they text me, they do whatever.
Okay.
It's easy.
We're towards the end of the hour, so I don't know if you guys have a few more questions. I mean, I got one question left. I don't know whatever you guys have, or Brendon, if you have any lasting thoughts that you want to say. But my last question for you would be, how much money do you think you have saved from the pockets of American people from Uncle Sam?
That's a good question.
Look at him racking his brain.
Yeah.
A lot.
A lot.
So you're on the number one enemies most wanted from the government.
Tens of millions.
Nice.
There you go.
You're on the right side of law, man.
Yeah,
Good for
Easy.
you.
Really easy. Yeah.
that's awesome.
Hats off to you, man. Hats off to you. Especially during trying times like that, man. I always kind of come back to that moral or that just the struggle of just dealing with death, and you have to see it all the fucking time, man. Like that's
So do you know what your perfect estate plan is?
I do not know.
To make your last check bounce. The problem is you don't know how much to write it for, what day to write it on. So you got to plan for something, right? I'm a big believer that if it's yours, spend it, do something, but enjoy it. Life's too short.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree
Absolutely,
with that.
man.
It's beautifully
Absolutely.
said right there. Do you guys have any lasting questions?
I don't. I know that sounds lame, but I really don't. I feel like you covered a lot of it, and I don't want to sound like it's oversimplified, but I guess what I'm saying is when you really get down to brass tacks, it's easier than I think most people think it is. Like
It is, and it shouldn't be an overwhelming or a process to be afraid of, right? And you got to approach it. I always approach it with a sense of humor, but I do that with everything in life anyway. And you talk about some not necessarily great things, but it's okay to talk about them and figure them out.
I do have a kind of a quick question here and I'm sure it probably doesn't get to this point because like you said, a lot of what your job is also talking to people and working through it before they ever get to the point of actually like making a will and stuff. You're like helping them kind of figure stuff out. But have you ever has anybody ever came in and been like, this is what I want to do? And it's like crazy. Like there's like,
Yes.
okay. Is there one you can tell us about without like names or anything? Anything that strikes out in your mind where you're like, man, this person for whatever reason thought they could just come in here and be like, I want all my stuff to go to buying clown outfits, and then these clown outfits are delivered
to my cats.
Yeah.
To my cats.
I got one, there was a squirrel trust.
Oh.
Long time ago, and it was actually one of my mentors that kind of came up with it. But there was a guy in town, and he had quite a bit of money. He didn't have any family, right? So every day, twice a day, he went to this park and he fed this family of squirrels. And he fed them this special kind of nut. He got him, drove to Arkansas and got him, put him in his car, went once a month, that kind of thing. And he was very concerned about what would happen to the squirrels if he died. Right? So what they came up with is they figured out what a life expectancy of a squirrel is. It's about 2 years. Okay. So after the guy died, they hired what's called a trust company to they managed the money, and the trust company hired 2 kids to go to the same park every day for 2 years, twice a day, to feed this family of squirrels.
Wow.
That's crazy.
At the end of that 2 years, the money, and it was a few $1 million, I believe, went to various charitable organizations around the city.
Wow.
That's crazy. That's super cool, actually. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
As long as it's not against public policy and you can think of it, you can pretty much do it.
I want to do some weird shit with
If
mine.
it gets too crazy, I'll probably try to talk you out of it if it gets too complicated.
I mean, that's because you're good at your job.
And if you still want to do it, I mean, it's like I'll do it, but you're not going to like it when you see it. We can try it. I've had that happen too.
Yeah. So one more, just a quick one. Like, what happens if I have a lot of money, I'm older, I got stuff, no next of kin, no anything, completely alone in the world, blah blah. Man, that's depressing. But someone who I mean, because that happens to people. Yeah. Someone with no family whatsoever, no parents, no kids, no grandparent, whatever. What happens with that? What does probate do with that?
Okay, so there's a thing called a wipeout, right? So if it's a really unaffectionate term, but if anybody you have thought of or immediate family, that kind of thing, if everybody's gone, if there's nobody left, every once in a while you'll see that I think there was a case, it was in the paper, where 2 kind of skateboarding punks in New York or something inherited something from some long lost relative in Alaska, right? So there's actually firms that could be engaged that will find somebody in your family to inherit your money.
Wow.
And you can hire these people, and they'll search and they'll scour and they'll find things. And then all of a sudden, voila, somebody you've never met before is going to get your money. It does happen. I've only seen 2 of them. 2 of them. One was really a cool deal. One of them, I think, after the lawyer's fees and the search company, the search firm's commission, I think they ended up with $700. The other one of them, it was they were retired. They were in their 80s and they'd worked, but they'd never amassed a lot or had a lot of money, but they had a good life. And some remote relative in North Dakota died, and went through this big probate process and everything. And this lady ended up getting a mineral override in an oil and gas field. They started getting checks for about $20,000 or $30,000 a month.
Wow! So it's almost like Mr. Deeds at that point. That's a good example.
And it kind of is.
Yeah.
And they'd never met the person.
Yeah.
That's honestly though, man, I very rarely will ever be like, yay, government, honestly. But that's honestly kind of cool that, like, it's not just like, oh, he's done, we're not even going to look into it, the government absorbs all this money, bye-bye.
No, they don't. You have to, I mean, there were, eventually it's called a sheet to the state, where it goes to the state. But I mean, you're going through mom, dad, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, first cousins, second cousins, third cousins. Yeah. I mean, you're going a long way.
Yeah.
Down that family tree. It's just there's people you can engage out there that will go and find them.
Cool. Do you think that's more just like pure volume of things like that happening, to where the government knows that it's not even in their best interest to like try to absorb that money? and
Well,
it's
they
almost,
don't have any claim to it, right? I mean, it's your asset. You can give it to whoever you want. The only
That's
person
simple.
you can't disinherit on the planet's a spouse.
that sounds
They don't
really
let you do that.
that sounds really beautiful, and I almost want to get into another topic, but I'm
That's
So
crazy to me
charities, that
too.
kind of thing, yeah.
I'm not saying that's still crazy to me that you can't disinherit a spouse. I understand the reasoning. I 100% understand the reasoning. I just like
You gotta get their permission first.
do you
Right? They have to consent to it, and so that's how that works. So technically, a house is a spouse is in simplified terms is basically entitled to half of everything you got if you die. And if you give them less than half, they can elect against your estate, and they can get half. But it's half of everything that he or she has and you have. So it's half of everything. So one big stack of chips, the spouse basically is going to end up with half of it.
gotcha.
Rock on, man. That was
Yeah,
fantastic.
this was so much fun.
Yeah, it was
this
a
one
lot.
was so much fun.
It was, Brendon. I appreciate it, man. I don't know if you have any lasting comments that you want to throw out there, man, but it's been it's been amazing, man.
It put you guys to sleep.
Don't shout out your law firm because we'll ruin you. Don't do that. You'll be out of business in a week.
No, I doubt
Just
that,
kidding.
man.
That's just kidding.
You're more than welcome to plug your law firm. I mean, people who join Talk Junkies know where we're from and what we do and what we talk about, man.
Now we run out of signature will and trust is what the firm's called.
Gotcha.
Very cool. And I don't know how many people, honestly, viewer-wise, are local anyway. So, yeah.
I don't keep up with that. You would know.
Yeah.
but
No, I mean, I don't think
He doesn't even know, so nobody knows.
Well, Brendon, thank you very much, man, for coming on, dude. It's been
Thanks
awesome.
for having me. I appreciate being here. That was fun.
I really learned a lot. I found it interesting. I know you said it puts people to sleep, but like I find it interesting. This is a bunch of stuff that I didn't know. So
Every once in a while, you get lucky, right?
Yeah. Rock on, man. Well, I'll probably see you here in a couple of days. So much
Perfect.
appreciated for joining, my man. Do you have a good
Okay.
night?
Hey, appreciate you guys having me.
thanks, Brendon.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, very informative, shit I didn't know. It's crazy. I mean, you just assume, like, you don't do any research. I didn't do any research, and I assumed that the government's going to do this, and that with me, and what happens if I don't do this, and that. And it was the complete opposite.
That's what
man.
shook me. That's what shook me more than anything else. We talk on this podcast specifically. We talk a lot about all the fucked up wrong shit that the government does.
Right.
Like, man, I hate saying this out loud, but props to them for actually.
Well, no, but like Brendon said, though, it's like, it's yours.
No, you should still hold up. You should still go through that and not go through probate and all that.
Right.
Yes.
But what he said at the very end, he's like, it doesn't even, like the last question you asked, he's like, what does it matter that the government gets involved anyways? If there were no next of kin or anything like that, he's like, because it's your stuff. And I don't think it applied to that, but he's like, it's your stuff. What does the government have to say about it anyways?
But obviously, you want to avoid probate.
Yeah.
You want to avoid that. Make your decisions yourself.
I mean, yes. It makes the most sense. Like, if you have some assets, you have a little bit of money, like, go on ahead and just do this. Like, make the small step.
Right.
You know?
yeah, for sure. Or, I mean, for me, worst case, I mean, like, if I couldn't afford something like that,
Which is
I would
different for
definitely,
you. You have kids.
Yeah.
It's way more important for
But
you.
I would do something as opposed to nothing. You know what I'm saying? No matter how expensive that was. But anyways, yeah, we're not going to go down that road. But I hope you guys enjoyed that, man. That was very informative. Again, like Brendon said, it's a lot different in each state, but I feel like there's probably a very common set of rules in most of the states with a little bit
Probably
of different.
some basics that stay the same and just some little weird ones that
Right.
are different here and there.
But hope you guys liked it, man. That's just what we're trying to do again. Just thinking through it in the podcast, I'm like, man, like I like this a lot because it applies to my everyday life. And granted, a lot of stuff we do does, but this is something that's more
It's grounded.
exactly grounded. Yes, it's more grounded. It's something that affects each and one of our lives. That's not conspiracy or anything like that. And not. I love conspiracy, by the way.
We
I was
know.
trying to
We
avoid
know.
it. There,
Yeah.
there were certain moments in the podcast where I was like, oh, man, I don't want to ask this question because I know that's where that's going to lead.
Some of
I
the-
said that like 2 times.
But I like the
think.
fact that we didn't, though,
Yeah.
honestly. I
Yeah.
like the
And
fact that this
straight
is a
away
little more
from it.
grounded, and this is something that
Keep it grounded. Keep it to the
every listener and viewer out there who knew nothing, who was like us and came into this knowing nothing about it in advance, learned something real.
Exactly. And you live a short life, and I think it's important, especially that we live in this country and it applies to everyone. They should all know. I mean, ultimately. So hopefully, yeah. either way, it was fun, and I'm going to push some type of shit like this just in different subjects, and I'm going to continue to try and bring you guys the best amount of knowledge that we can bring you. And Brendon gave you guys his knowledge. I hope that's very informative for you guys or gals, because if you didn't know anything about death, now you do.
Now you do.
So the best thing you can do for this video and for this podcast is just to share that video to everyone in America. So whenever they die or before they die, 20, 30 years before so, they know what to do.
Put us in your will.
Yeah. Don't put us in a will. Just share this video and you will know what to do when you die.
That's what we really need.
That's it. Share this video and boom, you know what, and you don't have to pay a lawyer a couple $100. Sorry, Brendon. We'll give you 10%, man, if this video hit 1 million views. But either way, thank you for joining. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell notification to all our junkies out there.
Stay fly and ring the bell.
I thought you were going to do a little like a
I didn't know what I was
Dumbledore
doing
or
with
something.
it. I didn't know what I was doing with it. That was a weird one.
Put your name in the goblet of fire.
Try to switch it up.